Okay, Harold, so I had a few minutes, so I'm just going to make you a quick video, show you how I finish these. So this is just a rough cut. This isn't an actual bottle stopper, but this was from the same pour that yours came from. I just had some left over, and I typically throw it into a little solo cup so I can do my test turns just to see what they're going to look like. And if you look, I just did a quick rough cut on this, but you can see there's tool marks pretty much just about everywhere. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I do this, and just bear with me here for 1 second. I'll get this camera set up here for you. All right, so here's what I've got. I got a piece of 600 grit paper. I'm also going to use a little bit of micro mesh. This is 1,000 grit. And then I've got my Zona paper. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. About 1400 RPM is what I like. If you notice, I'm using water. And I already soaked the sandpaper, and this is just how I do it. Let me just put a little bit of water on there. All the water does is help lubricate there just a little bit. Real light pressure. I'm letting the sandpaper do the work. All right, and if you can see on that sandpaper, you can see that white. That's actually the resin coming down. So they're coming off the blank. And actually, let me grab one more piece of shop towel here. I fold it just so I can give it a wipe every now and then. Because then if you don't, not only do you got the grit from the sandpaper that's the abrasive, but you've also got the leftover resin that's coming off that's also acting like an abrasive. But once again, I'm applying hardly any pressure. I'm just letting the sandpaper do its work. Barely any pressure. Now you should be able to take your finger and just kind of rub it on there, and you'll be able to tell if you still have some tool marks. And it shouldn't take much. I think you'd be surprised how much resin will actually come off of here. So let me wipe that off. Let's stop it and see where we're at. Actually not bad. They're pretty well, most of those are pretty well gone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the sandpaper and I'm just going to do lateral sanding, just really, really light. And that's all that's doing is just taking off the radial marks. That's all that's doing. Hardly any pressure whatsoever. Alumilite kind of scratches just a little bit easier. And frankly, another alternative to using sandpaper that I like, let me just wipe this off and then we'll go to the micro mesh. It's called Ambernet. This is Ambernet. This is a nice alternative. It's more like a net than what it is actual sand glued to a paper. All right, so it's a little bit less abrasive. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the lathe. I'm going to take a dry finger and just run it across there, and it'll dry out the blank real quick. And I'll look, and that looks pretty darn good. I didn't really hit the edges just because I'm trying to just stay focused on the center and just kind of give you a general idea how I do this. So it actually looks pretty good. So my next step is I'm going to use the micro mesh pad. The micro mesh pad starts off at 1,000 grit. All right. I got that at about 1,500 RPM. Hardly any pressure. Once again, hardly any pressure. Let the pad work for you. I use micro mesh. There's let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 micro mesh pads. They go all the way. Starts at 1,000 and goes all the way up to about, I want to say it's about 14,000 grit. Does a great job. I prefer Zona paper. If I got Zona paper, I'll use it. Let's see how that looks. It's actually looking pretty good. Once again, I sand laterally, real light, or you can do it underneath, however you want to do it, but it's really light. I tell you, I really like that color. That's probably one of my favorite blanks so far. It really is. Real light, just the weight of the pad. Let the pad do the work for you. All right, get some of the excess water off of there before I move on to Zona paper, because Zona paper isn't really a sandpaper, it's a finishing paper. It's a polishing paper. A lot of people like Zona, they call it Zona, but you can just go online and buy Amazon, whatever. There's still, let me just hit this again, there's still just a little bit on there I think that I can get rid of. And that little bit, I'm just kind of referencing some of the marks from the 600 grit. So even though I did it really light, there was still a few marks on there. So it doesn't take much with regular sandpaper to, when I first started using Alumilite, I got very frustrated because I was so used to working with wood and other acrylics. Once again, I'll rub my finger across there. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm done with the micro mesh. Now I'm going to roll straight into the Zona paper. Some people like to do this dry. Some people like to do it wet. I do all my stuff wet sanding. All right, I'm going to hold it there for about 20 seconds. And I'll crank it up just a little bit to about 2,000. For about another 5 seconds or so. 5-10 seconds. And once again, I'm just going to lateral sand. Just not even putting any pressure, just the weight of my hand. So really your first 2 sheets of Zona paper pretty much do most of the work. The rest is really focused on the polishing. And generally these squares, I can probably get 5 or 6 pins out of these squares. And normally I mark them, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the reason why I do that is because by the time you get to the 6, it's hard to tell which way is up. And if I mark it with a permanent marker, it's pretty good. I didn't mark these up yet. So that one's done. Take off a little bit of the excess water. And I'll grab my second pad. And I'm going to do this through all the pads. Now I'll kick it up just a little bit. God, that looks good. I really like that color combo. That is really cool. I like that. You know, everybody's got their own technique when it comes to this, Harold, so you know, I know people out there that just think I'm stupid for doing wet sanding, but me personally, that's my thing. I like to do it wet. I don't like to do it dry. I seem to have a little bit more luck when it's wet. So everybody's kind of got their own technique. All right, by the time you get to this 4th pad, this next pad, when you get done with that pad, that's really when the polish will start to come in. Really about that 4th pad is where it brings in the polish. Man, I really like that. I might return this and just make a paperweight. So It almost looks like it's alive. It's kind of cool. Once again, some lateral sanding just to get some of those the radial marks out of there. All right, here's my fourth pad. About 1500 RPM. Some people do it slower, some people do it faster. This is just what I found works for me. And you know, once you find a way that works for you, you know, why change it? So not real focused on the end. So when I zoom in on this at the end, you might see maybe some marks on the ends, but that's fine. I'm not worried about the ends. I just wanted to give you just a quick video on how I do this. So but you can see that's through step 4. That polish is already kind of starting to come through here. Moving on to step 5. Turn that up just a little bit. Plus I don't want to do the ends because I don't like touching. I've just got this in between centers and I hot glued 2 remnants of blanks in there just to kind of hold it in place. Once again, light pressure, some lateral sanding. It does kind of get monotonous, but you know, if turning is 90% of the battle, then quite frankly, finishing is the next 90%. So finishing is where you make your money. You can have the greatest turn thing in the world, but if a customer looks at it up close and the finishing is bad, well, what's the point in selling it? So 90% of my effort should be going into the finishing of the final product, whether you're going to keep it or sell it. So all right. You know, that's the last one. I'll just lateral sand it real quick. And the reason why I do that is because next I'm going to put some, I don't know what's it called, some plastics on it. Some of these blanks I do use a buffer. The more translucent ones I will use a buffer. You don't have to, but it does kind of help just a little bit. Once you start getting into the translucent stuff, which I'm getting ready to cast your blanks here in a few minutes, it can be a real pain because the more translucent it is, the more you can see those scratches. So those radial and lateral scratches. So I think that's looking pretty good. There is just a little tool mark right there, and that's fine. I just wanted to show you my process. I probably could have sanded it just a hair more. There's 2 things that I use next. Is either, I'm sorry, let me turn that upside down, Plastex or Scratch 2.0. Virtually the same thing. The only difference is the 2.0 is just a little bit finer grit. But for today, what I'm doing, I'll just use the Plastex. It's just a plastic polish. Wipe it on. I let the lathe go up to speed. I'm turning about 1600. Okay. You can kind of see how that already got a little polish on it. Do it a second time. All right, and the last one, I'll put it on, and then I've got a little buffing thing that I use. And wipe that dry. And just remember, the cloth that you use, that paper towel, also is somewhat abrasive. So there we go. Okay, Now, I did this kind of fast just because I wanted to keep the size of the video kind of short, but I think you get the idea. Really good polish on there, I think. Let me get this camera. But not bad. Not bad. You might see a tool mark. Let's see. There's just a little tool mark right there. I probably could have sanded with 600 grit just a little bit more, but it turned out pretty nice. Yeah, you can see it. You can kind of see it right there in that video right there, which is no big deal, honestly. Just maybe a few more seconds at 600 grit and it would have been fine. If the 600 grit really isn't working for you too much, drop it down to 4 for just a little bit and then bring it back up to 6. So hope this video helps, man.